l- let me backtrack a little bit. Okay, so you think that this pandemic is artificial? Somebody started this. It's not something that spontaneously sort of appeared in Wuhan, China. You think that this has a sinister component, that somebody started this deliberately? Is that what you're
It's
saying?
it's very possible. It's very possible, but in the end of everything, Jiggy, my honest heart-to-heart answer to this is only God knows.
Okay.
And what matters for us right now is not necessarily to know who is the sinister mind behind everything, but I think what matters is how can this situation change you as a person? How can you evolve out of this? How can you become a better version of yourself? I think that's the finer point that I'd like to make. And like I said earlier, you know, it's something that I myself, I'm trying to dig deeper on and try to research on. But I do believe that there are powerful people who are capable of doing this, but there's a God who's far more powerful who can take us out of this.
So you're not yet 100% sure that as this is something that was artificially created. So you're leaning towards it, but you're still digging deep into whatever data, mountain of data that the internet information highway has. Is that correct in saying that?
Yeah, I'd like to say that the stand that I'm making has to be further validated. This
Okay.
is just an opinion. It's just a
Okay.
feeling that I have. It's conjecture.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, what matters is we've got to be able to respond to what's ahead of us, what's in
Okay.
front of us.
Okay.
And you know, reality is tough, but it's something we've got to embrace right now, and we've got to prepare for that nonetheless.
Uh, Somebody once said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. And the claim that this is something that's artificial, that or somebody planted or started this sinister pandemic is an extraordinary claim. And I think it also requires an extraordinary proof. And I think you're beginning to dig deep into that extraordinary proof, right? But the fact of the matter is, we are in this pandemic. We are in this what I call a coronaverse. And we have been on lockdown for a long, long time, different levels. Now here in Cebu, we are now on GCQ, if I'm not mistaken, right? So, Adrian, how do you reposition yourself? How do you personally rebrand yourself in an environment like this, in an environment that we've never seen before in our lifetimes?
Well, thanks for the question, Jiggy. I think this is a situation wherein everything is on ground zero, which is pretty much you and I having to start all over again and build everything from scratch. You know, it's a level playing field for everyone. And so
Okay.
I'm thinking about the people right now, Jiggy, who may have lost their jobs. They may have been retrenched. There are so many people in the country right now who are unemployed. There are so many people who lost also their position in the companies that they work for. And so in this kind of situation, there are two things that we can offer. We can either rebrand ourselves, or we can either reinvent ourselves. You know, there are
Okay.
people out there who have lost their jobs, but maybe this is a golden opportunity for them to reinvent themselves and transition to a different industry where they can be more, you know, successful, where they can really help their families even more. Like, for example, I know the story of quite a famous photographer in the country. And because weddings have pretty much died down, he decided to reinvent himself, and he decided to get into the financial planning industry. And even in his first 2 months, he's doing very, very well. He understands that he's losing something that he's very passionate about, but he also realizes that he is redirecting his life mission to saving lives by protecting them in terms of their finances. So this is one way of reinventing yourself, you know? It doesn't mean that he may never go back to photography. It can only mean that photography will take you know, a backseat for a while, but he can recover that passion. What I'm trying to say is we've got to do something that's relevant for the situation we are at right now. Or maybe there are people out there who need to rebrand themselves. For example, if you're a real estate broker, there's so many of us right now trying to sell real estate to a market that's quiet. So what will differentiate us from everybody else? Now, I think we need to learn to position, package, and differentiate ourselves so that you become the preferred choice in the marketplace right now.
Okay. Before we move forward with that question, let me just backtrack a little bit again. When you
Sure.
say rebrand, okay, I guess it presupposes that you have a brand, right? So maybe you can give us sort of the basics of what branding is. What do you mean by personal branding? What does it mean when you brand a person? Because usually you brand things, you brand products, you
Sure.
brand companies. But now you're saying a person can be his or her own brand. What do you mean by that? Give us the basics, Adrian. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, basically, when we were kids and we were children, we were labeled already by family members, by our parents, and even by our friends. You know, they called us names. Like, I'll never forget when I was in high school, I was labeled as the walking flagpole without a flag. Among my cousins, I was labeled as pepperoni pizza. And that pretty much stayed with me for quite a while, and it affected my self-esteem, to be quite honest. You know, so branding per se has something to do about your personal reputation. And in the world today, whether we like it or not, first impressions will count. In fact, it takes 5 seconds for you to make a first impression. Your image influences the people around you. Your influence or your image affects your reputation, and your reputation affects your future. Now, you mentioned a while ago that we do not brand people. Normally, we brand stuff, and I totally agree. But people do business with people. People do business with companies, but at the end of the day, they relate to people. And before people buy into you or they buy into your message, they've got to buy into the messenger first. And that's the reason why it's very important for us to find a way to brand ourselves, not to be fake, not to fake it till we make it, but to brand ourselves based on our, based on our competency, our character, based on the way we project ourselves to add value to the marketplace. I think people need to learn that, because the reality is you're not the only insurance person. You're not the only real estate developer or broker. You're not the only doctor out there. People will only work with people, and they will work with people that they like and people that they trust. And so it all boils down to a person's reputation. They actually said, Jiggy, that it takes so many years to build on a solid name, but only one mistake to ruin your reputation, right? That's absolutely true. But it's also very possible that your reputation can take you from ordinary to extraordinary without faking it.
Okay. So the basics, did you just run down to us the basics of what personal branding is? Was that what you were saying?
I was pretty much trying to define it in layman's term, that your
Okay.
personal brand is your reputation of who you are. Like when we think about Jiggy Jr., what's the first thing that comes into the mind of people? People will say he's a broadcaster. People say he's a celebrity host. People say that he's got a podcast and everything. So all these different impressions that they have of you represents you.
Okay.
That's the recall and the recognition that people have of you. So in your industry right now, to be quite honest, I can't really think so much of people who are doing exactly what you're doing.
Okay.
And so what you're doing to yourself right now is you are positioning, you're packaging, and you're differentiating yourself from the mold. And that gives you an advantage for more people to connect with you.
First of all, since I am your example, it is not a deliberate thing that I am trying to do here. It is just because this is what I love to do. This is my passion. I love talking. I love learning. Hopefully I'm a learning machine. I'm still a sponge, no matter how old I am. I love learning from people like you. So it is not a deliberate and methodical and sinister part of me that's saying I've got to brand myself as this person. I am just doing what I love doing. Is it possible that what I'm doing is actually branding?
It is already. Most of the time, what we're passionate about becomes who we are.
Okay.
And who we are is the recall that people have of us.
Okay.
If you're passionate about what you're doing, I'm very passionate about training and development. So when
Okay.
people ask, what's Coach Adrian or who is Adrian Day?
Okay.
And normally they're going to say, well, he's a coach, he's a trainer, he's a husband to one wife, and he's a father to two sons. You know, it's not something that you have to methodically do. But for those people who do not have a personal brand yet, we do believe that there's a framework, there's a blueprint, there's a method of doing it so that they can give themselves an ability to be attractive to the market that they're trying to target, especially for professionals, you know? So yes, you don't have to deliberately make things up, you know, but at the same time, it's also very important for people to find a way to brand themselves so that they can reach more people in their sector, in their industry, in their organization, wherever they may be.
So give us an example of that without giving everything away, because you do have a webinar that you're doing very soon, right? But without giving away everything, give us an example of how one sort of brands himself, whatever characteristics, whatever passions that he has or she has. How do you make that part of your brand?
Well, basically, people will know you based on how you project yourself. There are a couple of things that we always share and teach. It's
Okay.
broken down into three pillars. The
Okay.
first one is your purpose. Like, what is your objective? What is your why? Why do you do what you do? You know, what are you really, really passionate about? And we've got to be very clear about that. The
Okay.
second thing is your performance. I think it's very important that if you want to excel in any field, in any craft, you've got to have mastery. And at the same time, you've got to perform very, very well, because your performance is also your report card. And the
Okay.
third one is your packaging, you know, the way you carry yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's internal and it's external. You know, when we talk about internal, it's your innate abilities, it's your competencies, it's your skill. If we're talking about external, it's your appearance, it's your aura, the charm, your communication skills, and so on and so forth. So these are the three things that really go together to build your personal brand: performance, purpose, and packaging.
So in effect, you're sort of commoditizing a person. It's like ketchup. This is high end. It's spicy and it's expensive and all that stuff. It doesn't doesn't. Are we in danger of commoditizing a person when you apply all those principles that you apply to a bottle of ketchup or a company to a person?
Well, if it's interpreted that way, it could be. But in reality,
Okay.
it's more like a strategy, you know, because
Okay.
we live in a very judgmental society. For example, I'm a book lover,
Okay.
and I've been given so many books. I also buy books for myself. And normally,
Okay.
why do you and I buy a book? First, it's because it was recommended by someone, or the title is actually very interesting.
To you,
But it's
yeah.
very, very funny that when you go to Fully Book, for example, or a national bookstore, there are so many books out there that have great content,
Mm-hmm.
but here's the problem. Maybe the cover is not interesting. Maybe the design's not interesting. You
Okay.
know, maybe there's a lack of marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe nobody knows the author as much,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's the reason why there's got to be some branding there, so that there's also awareness to the market, or
Okay.
the sector in society that you want to reach or touch.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not saying that personal branding will instantly make you successful. What I'm trying to say is personal branding is that first step to get your foot on the door, so that you can knock on the doors of people's lives to bring out a service, a product that you might be sharing to the world, or even yourself as a human being. Like, there's so many speakers out there who are so talented. In Cebu, there's just so many talented speakers and traders out there, right? But
Mm-hmm.
why is it that some people have not heard of some of these guys who have great content, who can really engage a crowd? Like, why is it that sometimes when we read books, for example, I've never heard about that book, but why is it so interesting? You know, maybe the reason behind that is because there's a lack of awareness, and personal branding helps create that awareness. So if you talk about, you know, turning something into a money-making machine, That is the end result, but that's not the first reason why we should personally brand ourselves. It
Okay.
will be the result of your actions. So for example, if a doctor's reputation is known to be someone who's very high touch and not just high tech, somebody who really cares for his patients, somebody who actually follows up and makes sure that he prescribes the right medication, the reputation that precedes him is attracted to people because they end up trusting him. And so the lines are longer in his clinic. So the end result of that is that he does earn more, that he does make more because of the work that he's put in, because of the reputation that he's built. And
Okay.
so I guess what we're trying to do here, Jiggy, is we want to help professionals bounce back, be resilient, but not just to go back to work and punch in your card or put in your name tag there. We just want to help professionals, entrepreneurs, executives, leaders, and how to reinvent or rebrand yourselves so that you can reach more people, you can add more value, you can make a bigger difference in the lives of others.
So it's like showing your best foot forward and hiding the bad parts. Is that?
I don't think so. You know, it's interesting, guys, that when you're courting a girl, you're always best foot forward. You're always bringing out the roses and the chocolates, and you're bringing out a car that you borrowed from somebody else, you know? But in reality, you have nothing to show for it. People are still attracted to authenticity. People do not like the idea of fake it till you make it. I have been indoctrinated by that saying for so many years in my life. And I just want to tell everybody out there that it's not real, to be quite honest. It's interesting, Jiggy, that human beings right now find it difficult to tell the difference between an authentic bag, whether it's a Salvatore Ferragamo or a Louis Vuittones, right? But why is it, Jigs, that they can tell if a person is real or fake?
Yeah,
There's something about that because we have discernment as human beings. So what we're trying to say is, no, this is not a strategy for you to put something on your resume that's actually not there. People can sniff and people can tell if you're faking it or not. And people will work with those who are authentic, real, truthful, who have integrity.
Okay. Let's just say rock stars, right? Rock stars are exposed for who they are, for their talents and for their bad sides as well. And people love them for who they are. That's why we have globally popular rock stars. Let's say in the corporate world, let's just give an example to like Steve Jobs, for example. You know, he is who he is, and he's exposed for who he is, both his good side and his bad side. That's why people are drawn to him. That's why he's become a global sensation that he was and still is until now, although he's been dead a few years now. So because he's real, because he's authentic, because we know that he's got a good side and he's also got a sinister and bad side. He was a horrible boss, they say, and he expected too much from a lot of people and all that stuff. And, you know, you can see that and read about that in books. But we know them for their good sides and their bad sides. Is it good to expose both of them when you do product? Should you expose just your good side and let people sniff your bad side, or should you just let it out there in the open?
Well, first of all, the example you gave is a public figure. I mean, Steve Jobs is iconic, right? Yeah. And so when you're a public figure, automatically what happens there is that people have access to your life. Because you are in public, right? Same thing with a celebrity. It's a lot different for individuals and small Joes like you and I mean, compared to these guys. Well, at least you're a mini celebrity, bro. You know?
No, not as big as you.
After all the years that you've been in the broadcast industry. Now, the question that you ask is it okay for people to know both the good and the bad about you? You know, when we read a book, when we watch a movie, when we look into a story, everything is seen right there in front of us. And I guess what the most important thing that we have to stand for is really your integrity. It's like who you are in private is who you are in public.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, when I was listening to one of my mentors speak, he was reminding us that it's very, very important for us to have what we call the one-man principle. that whoever you are as a husband is the same as the way you operate as an executive, as a broadcaster, as a person in the public eye. It just so happens that sometimes when we're out in public, sometimes we put on a mask or a facade, or we try to put on a face of trying to be someone when we're not. That's what we call hypocrisy. And people can sniff and tell the difference if there is no alignment in who you say you are to who people see who you really are. You know, so here in personal branding, we don't use this as a strategy to make you look good. We use this as an opportunity for you to reach more people, but it's very fundamental and foundational for the person to have alignment in their integrity. That means to say that whoever they are in private must be who they are also in public.
I've said this before about broadcasting, about being a radio personality. You know, you've got to be out there and be yourself when you open the microphone, because people can sniff a fake a mile away. And somebody else, to sound like somebody else, or say something that isn't really what is in your heart. They can sniff that from a mile away or even further. Are we giving the audience, are we giving the people too much credit? Do you think they can sniff a fake? Really?
Yes and no. I think it depends on proximity. Because public people, sometimes the world will only see their Instagram accounts and it's like exploding with likes and comments and hearts, but they don't really know the background story or the real life scenario of this human being. And many a times when we're on social media, we present to the world that life is great, when the truth is behind the scenes, life can be depressing, lonely, and sad sometimes. You know, so I think it depends on proximity, because when people know you and they've been exposed to you, and they know for a fact that, wait a second, you're not necessarily walking the talk, or you're not actually living out what you're preaching. These are the people who observe you on a daily basis, whether they're your employees, your coworkers, your teammates, your bosses, everybody else. They can tell because of the proximity, you know? So you can project to the whole world that life is great, but the people who are seeing you every single day can have a different opinion based on their observation of who you are.
I guess people, the audience, you know, your market, if you want to call it that, is more receptive if you're real, right? If who you are is who you are outside of the camera, because something happens to you when the camera is on, right? Something happens to me when the microphone is on. Something snaps. It's like a switch on, switch off button. But I think I have been doing what I've been doing for this long is because I don't know the difference anymore. There is no difference. When I open the microphone, that's me. It no longer is something that I put a facade on. That's why I'm consistent with who they hear and what they see, because that's me. I have blurred the lines from who I am in front of the camera, in front of the microphone, to who I really am without it.
Sure. Yeah, you're being very authentic. You're being real. And also, one of the things that people will take notice of, Jiggy, is the fact that when you do the things that you do, they can really see if it's sincere, if it's wholehearted. They can see if you're doing this for the sake of public service, right? And not just for the sake of popularity. You know, because people can really tell based on our intentions. Like, for example, you've been approached by a salesperson before, and you know for a fact if that person is only interested in the commission more than the mission of life insurance. You know that, right? You can tell the difference, right? And so when someone is so used to doing something already, you're absolutely right. They get so used to it, it becomes a part of their life, their DNA becomes who they really, really are, and people will take notice of that. I think what's really important, though, is we need to have an awareness that when we do the things that we do, we also have to get feedback from others. Are we doing something that feels real, or are we doing something simply to impress and to get likes or comments or to be popular? You know, I think we need to have a small circle of people also willing to give us feedback, you know, because feedback really, you know, creates the awareness for us. And it makes us open our eyes to the reality that we might be blindsided sometimes. We might be taking ourselves too seriously, but there are other people out there who do not see other angles in our lives that we ought to see.
I'm just kind of apprehensive about the idea of personal branding because you sort of highlight your good sides, your talents, your skill set, whatever it is you're good at, because that's marketable. That's the good side of you. What happens to the bad side of you?
That's a really good question. And I think the bad side is something we all have to work on. Like, it's very possible that you're very prolific in sales or you're a very great executive, but it's very possible that you may have a drinking problem. And some people, some people in the office will say, oh, that guy has a drinking problem and everything. But at the end of the day, if you're the kind of executive who's aware that there are some flaws and imperfections in your life that can still be polished, that can still be refined, especially when you know that those weaknesses or kryptonites will have an effect in tarnishing your good name and your reputation, then definitely that person from awareness needs to go through something called adjustment. They need to change some of the things that will weigh them down and slow them down or affect their reputation and their good name as a person. Like, for example, if the community knows that Adrian Ding is a husband to one and a father to two sons, you will never, ever find me in a spa alone. Never. I would never, ever go without my wife rather. Why? Because it's a place that I feel could actually jeopardize some of the things, the values that I stand for without me having to say it to the world. If I go to the spa alone and somebody touches me, I'm telling you, like any other man, something is going to happen. There will be some kind of stimuli, if you know what I'm trying to say. Yeah. And if people will see me jiggy, like, I saw Adrian. I wish I could say this in Cebuano, but
you can say it in Cebuano. Why not?
Like kita lagi kong Adrian na niya sa usan niya gabi unya nasi kuyog na. And word gets around and it spreads like a virus. And next thing you know, you wake up the following day, people are looking at you. I also have to be very careful of my actions.
Well, I appreciate the example, but what I'm trying to say, Adrian, is this. You're an insurance agent. That's our example. And you don't really want to talk to this particular kind of person, right? You hate talking to this kind of person because you know that, he's going to be full of crap and all that stuff. So you're faking it. You're not really enthusiastically talking to this person because you're trying to sell him or her something. That's why you're putting up a facade. How do you deal with something like that, a situation that is akin to that, wherein there are instances wherein, you don't like it, but still you pretend that you like it because you have a goal?
Clarity.
Yeah.
I think it boils down to clarity. I think the individual needs to be very crystal clear about his intentions or his motives right from the very beginning.
Okay.
If you're going to do insurance, understand the number one reason is not for you to be MDRT. That's the result of helping many people. Okay. I think the number one reason why you should do insurance is because you want to protect the lives of other people in the same way that you yourself experience the impact of life protection. So if that is clear to you, even if you're going to be talking to a business person who is known to be rude or known to be difficult to deal with, you will bring down your subjectivity and you will bring yourself back to your mission-centeredness so that you can present a product that could be of service to this human being. So you've got to bring down those walls as well, and clarity gets you there.
Okay. So obviously there are rules in personal branding, right? And now that we inhabit this CoronaVerse, this totally and different world, what rules still apply and what rules don't apply anymore?
Well, I'll just give you a few because the rest I can share in a different platform where everyone can learn and dig deeper. One of the things that I'd like to share to everyone is the importance of being authentic and real, which we talked about earlier. Another thing also is to make sure that if you are going to profess that you have some expertise over something, you've got to make sure that you've got something to back it up.
Okay.
Because if you're going to pretend that you are an oncologist when the truth is you did not really finish that study at all, what's going to happen is it's going to boomerang over you, and it's going to destroy your entire reputation. Your license is going to be stripped away from you. A third thing that I would like to say is this: make sure that you identify the people that you want to serve. Make sure that you identify the people that you want to serve. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, I think you have so much clarity that the strategies and the tactics will follow eventually. Here's another thing that I'd like to share. Do not try to be all things to everyone. You know, there's a saying that the more multi-hyphenated you are, the more successful you can be. Well, it depends. If you can do so many things and be great at all of those things, fantastic. But choose one or two things that you're really, really good at. Why? Because that will be the best recall that people will have of you. You know, try not to be all things to everyone, because the truth is when we do that, we end up being people pleasers. And the reality is we can't please everybody, right? And we only dilute the authenticity of who we are based on we trying to be everyone to everything. You know, the typical, there's a couple of salespeople out there probably who, they're selling like vitamins, they're selling insurance, real estate, and then underwear as well. Like, what are you really selling? Choose one. Choose underwear. One opportunity and focus on that and work on that instead of being too much of a sigurista so that everybody will buy into you. Because people do not really know what your identity stands for right from the very beginning. So those are a couple of rules, Jiggy, that I'd like to share.
And now that we have this CoronaVerse, this COVID-19, that we are all, we can't shake people's hands anymore, and all of these new rules that we have to abide by. Has the rules changed in personal branding, or personal branding, the rules remain the same?
That's the reason why personal branding, all the more, Jiggy, is relevant today. Okay. Because people back in the day do business through the power of the handshake. Mm-hmm. The handshake was more powerful than contracts 30, 40 years ago. Today, people don't trust each other anymore. And now that facial interaction, face-to-face contact is so limited, the trust factor has gone up. And for them to trust you, what they're going to do is this: they're going to check on you first, right? Like for example, if you want to work with a typical employee, when they're called for a job interview, for example, what do they normally do? The knee-jerk reaction is to go to Google and check if that company actually exists, that it's not like a hoax or something like that. So in today's day and age, when you're trying to make an appointment with someone, they get your name. Say, for example, the name is Michelle Rodriguez. And what they're going to do is they're going to background check on you and look into your social media feeds and all these other stuff. And they're going to try to see, is this person someone that I'd like to work with, right? Is this the kind of candidate that we want to hire? And so all the more, Jiggy, personal branding is relevant today, because we are in a world right now where trust is so much needed. There's got to be connection, and reputation is the lubricant of that brings connection together among human beings. Like, why would I want to do business with this particular lawyer? It's not just because this guy has a big name. It's also because this guy has results. But when I look into his life based on the recommendations of other people, they're going to tell me he's easy to work with. He understands what you want. He's not going to, he's not going to go under the table and stuff like that. That gives me the feeling of safety to consider working with that person. So I guess by and large, what I'm trying to say is it's not only about your social media accounts. It's not only about your resume or your CV. It's also based on the testimonials, the recommendations, and how people know you. Because today we do business with people that we like and people that we trust.
Now that we are here in this CoronaVerse, Adrian, more and more, our personalities are just what they see on social media. More and more, they don't get to shake our hands. We don't get to see them eye to eye because there's a mask or a face shield. More and more, our personalities, who we are, is who they see on social media. Um, is that a bad thing or a good thing for personal branding?
It can be a good thing, and quite honestly, it can also be a bad thing. Let me give you a
Okay.
very simple example. A couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to do training for a real estate company,
Okay.
and I was pretty shocked because one of the agents had this particular strategy to lure and to fish for clients. And, they'd wake up in the morning and take a picture, a selfie of themselves in their nightgown and everything, and send this personal message to their clients to say, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, and stuff like that. And sometimes it works, but many times it doesn't.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, that person is not aware that what he or she does can actually have a ripple effect, not only to himself, but also to the brand or the company that they work for.
Okay.
So I would like to encourage people to be very careful about the stuff that they post. I'm not saying that you should not post anything at all, but I think the stuff that we post on social media should be value adding. I think it's got to be a real account where you show to people who you are as a human being and what you do that adds value to the marketplace. It shouldn't be, in my opinion, I don't think it's great if you're going to be splashing your social media feeds with all kinds of controversial stuff, like if you know what I mean,
Yeah.
like controversial stuff that people are going to be turned off. So we've got to be very careful. I think we've got to be very discerning of the things that we tell the world about ourselves.
So do you separate?
Say that again, Jigs.
Do you separate the person that you're trying to brand for the corporate world, and do you delineate? Do you have a line separating that from your personal self? Do you suggest having two accounts, a personal account and a personal branding account, or should they be one and the same?
Well, we all have to go back to the one-man principle, Jiggy, that I shared a while ago. It's very important to have alignment of who you are privately and publicly. I do have two accounts though on Facebook, a business page and a personal page. On the business page, it's all about work. It's all about business. It's all about adding value to the marketplace. And the personal page is about my family and my personal experiences. I do that because I really want to have some distinction. But what I'm trying to say is there's got to be alignment. You've got to be perpendicular to who you really are on the inside.
So why have two accounts?
One account is for business and the other account is for personal.
So aren't they one and the same?
They are one and the same. If they check both accounts, they'll realize it's not just the photos or the person who's the same, but the lifestyle, the kind of image that I am projecting as a human being of who I really am is what's seen on those two.
So why have two accounts? Why don't you just have them in one account? What's the difference? Why do you need to have a personal account? Why do you need to have a business account? If they're perpendicular, if they're one and the same, why have two accounts? What is your general purpose for that?
That's a really good question. The business account reaches more people. The personal account has its own limitations. If my strategy, if my objective is to reach out to more people in the marketplace, then I've got to set up a business page as well, right? And the personal page is really for friends, the people that we have within our circle. But if you look at both accounts, you'll see that what I said in that particular page is equally the same as this person on the other page.
So it is just a matter of strategy, and it's a matter of purpose that but you really don't have a purpose why you have a personal account, except for the fact that the business account reaches out to more people, right? You're not concerned about privacy. You're not concerned about anything that you put out on social media, because whatever it is that you put out on your personal page, right?
I'm concerned about whatever I post.
Okay.
I'm not a trigger happy person. I'm not the kind of person
Okay.
who's upset and I'm just going to post anything under the sun.
I know
I
those kinds of
like to
people. Okay.
say personally that I'm strategic when it comes to doing that, because I know the purpose for social media based on my opinion.
Okay.
It's not for the whole world to see me.
Hmm.
It's for me to be able to inspire and add value to people through the articles that I write, or through the things that I do. You know,
Hmm.
it's that's the reason why I do that. And
Hmm.
so I'm very particular about the things that I post, and it's not on an everyday thing, because I do not want to, you know, be toxic, and I do not want to suffocate people with that. So I also have a social responsibility to use social media responsibly.
Okay, I like that. And I like the segue because I want to talk about another subject, although this is still related to personal branding. I know that you're also a lead trainer for the Academy of Extraordinary Teens, right? And it's increasingly becoming more difficult now to raise children, to raise teens with social media. And I know that I asked you earlier about whether you saw the documentary, The Social Dilemma, and you said you didn't, right?
I haven't.
Yeah, but you should. But what I'll do is I'll give you an idea of what it's all about. It's
Sure.
about how we have been digitized as people, how
Mm.
we are all just data to an algorithm, sort of like a data crunching machine that looks at us as data. And what this algorithm does is it becomes the selling point. The product is us. We are being sold to companies based on the data that they have on us, so they can predict what we will eventually buy. They can predict what we will eventually say. They can predict when we will want to go online. And they want us to go online all the time. And these things, these algorithms, they're not manned by people. They're created by people, but they're just being left alone out there reading us, you know, crunching us, making us into bits and pieces, into data, so they can understand us and predict us even more. The longer this algorithm is out there, the more it will know about us, and the better it is becoming an instrument for a brand, let's say a company, to sell us something, because they can predict what we want. They can predict what we will need. And these are things that our kids are exposed to. These are
Mhm.
things that are working their magic on us. So, how do you feel about raising children now? Actually, just raising people in general, including ourselves, based on this whole paradigm that social media world has created.
Well, first of all, I do agree with you that at the end of the day, we're all just bits and pieces of data in some kind of algorithm. And whenever you scroll, whenever you swipe, whatever you see, the algorithm also drives you to go to certain websites or certain things that you're interested in. And at the end of the day, it's going to be monetized. You know, it's going to try to drive us to make some kind of buying decision.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to all the parents who are watching right now, and if you have teenagers in particular who are struggling, they are struggling right now, Jiggy, with so many things.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, they're struggling right now with the idea of online schooling
Mm-hmm.
because it's something brand new. Parents are stressed because they can't help their teens except provide for the laptop and internet connection. Students are stressed because their teachers are not as reachable. They've got to learn things on their own. And some of these concepts require the presence of a teacher. And then there's also what we call peer stress. You know, when they get into these group chats and, you know, some of their friends have overtaken them or are way ahead of them in some kind of a task,
Mm-hmm.
they are stressed in terms of their self-esteem. So what happens now, Jiggy, is that they find some kind of distraction and they go into social media, they go into IG, TikTok,
Mm-hmm.
Netflix. I would not say that these are bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What makes it bad is when we become increasingly attached to it, that we cannot live without it. In fact, one of the best ways for you to tell that a person is addicted to devices and social media is when they do not admit that they are. All right, it starts there. And so I do agree that so many teenagers, because of all this stress, they need some kind of expression, they need some kind of an outlet, and they find social media interesting. But in the process of looking at social media, Now they're going through another insecurity issue because they're going through something called comparison. You know, why is his or her life better than mine? Why is their food tastier than mine? You know, why is his summer better than my own summer? Life sucks. And so because of that, they develop envy and bitterness, and then it spirals into depression. So if the question is, how can we as parents support our teenagers and raise them right now? The key is to be intentional in building relationships with them. You know, not just to leave them on their own, but to do things that the parent and the child can enjoy together. Let's face it, you know, 20 years, 30 years ago, Jigs, you and I, after dinner, we would sit right in the living room to watch the A-Team or Cops or something like that. In this day and age, every person can go to their respective rooms and watch Netflix on demand. We've lived our lives separately, or YouTube, right? And so the family has to be intentional to find a way to bring everyone together.
But how do you combat this very beautiful, immersive, colorful world that the internet is? I mean, we're just people, and the internet is a bundle of information. They can have all their friends there. They can watch whatever they want. It is so colorful. It is so immersive. We're just mere mortals, Adrian. You have to understand that we're not as colorful, as attractive, as convincing, as compelling as the internet.
We can't stop the tug of war. Yeah. We just can't, because as you said, it's very immersive, it's very colorful, it's 4K, and it's realistic. So the goal here is not to compete against it. And we're not saying that technology is bad. As a matter of fact, technology is good because it's supposed to bridge the gap, but it's not meant to be the gap. So what I'm trying to suggest here is that I think it's important for us to have our own entertainment. I'm not disagreeing to that. I think my wife and I enjoy watching Netflix away from our children, but I think it's very important for parents to be intentional in their parenting. Okay. I think it's important for parents to build bridges and relationships with their teenagers or their children, and not just walls, and not just to be the parent authority all the time, but also to reach out to them as somebody that they can trust. Because the truth is, teenagers today no longer want their parents' advice. They want their parents' provision, but they don't want their parents' supervision. The truth is, teenagers today would rather get their validation and their acceptance from their friends, from the bigger tribe, than their own parents, because they've lived with their parents all their lives. You know, so parents now have the responsibility to try to bring the gravitational pull back to them. And that starts with us finding what's interesting, looking for activities and opportunities, not just vacations, to really get to know our children one person at a time. You know, I think it's very important right now that you brought this up, because the reality is families today, even as they staycation in their homes, are under severe attack. Many families are fighting and quarreling because of uncertainty, financial issues, marital problems, school issues, etc., etc. Now more than ever, the pandemic has given us an opportunity to try to figure things out as a family.
Wow. So Adrian,
yeah,
I feel that millennials, people who were born with the internet as a fact of life, than people who were born and were kids before the internet era, like you and me. It seems to me that somehow they're more adapted to the world now than we are, because we needed to adjust from what was our world before the internet and what it is now. In fact, I think it's the kids that are more online now, that are more on Facebook and Instagram and social media than people as old as we are. I'm not saying that we're very old, but I'm just saying that they woke up and breathed the internet, the social media air, and don't know any better. In the meantime, here we are, comparing and romanticizing the past on how we used to play sungka, how we used to play batolata and run around and, you know, play with sticks and all that stuff and get ourselves muddy. and all that. We're romanticizing that. But
Sure.
the truth is, these kids woke up to the internet. They don't know any better. They can't
Hmm.
understand what batolata is. They don't get that.
Hmm.
So are they more equipped to deal with all this data, with all this information on the internet than we are?
Well, definitely young people are more tech savvy than we are. I mean,
Okay.
they can set things up in 5 minutes, which will normally take us about 5 hours.
Okay.
But what children really, really need from us right
Okay.
now is to make sure that there's an infusion of values into their lives.
Okay.
Values, Jiggy, drive behavior.
Okay.
Values becomes the fundamentals of your mindset. So if we as parents are driving the right values by modeling it first, they've got to
Okay.
see it in us first. That if we're
Okay.
going to talk about honesty, they've got to see honesty in us.
Mm-hmm.
If we expect from them someone that we're not, they're not going to dive into that simply because they see a hypocrite in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's critical right now is not trying to take technology away from them, but it's to make sure that we drive the right values to them. For example, we can say to our 16-year-old son, you can watch Netflix, you can always go online, but just remember, whatever you do right now will always have a consequence or will always have an effect. If you're spending so much time right now on Netflix, what's going to happen is you're going to be behind. Do you want to be behind? If not, here's my suggestion. Try to finish what you can, and then you can go on your Netflix later. Then you'll have more time. So what I'm trying to say is not the complete erasure or eradication of technology. What I'm trying to say is I think parents should also learn to dialogue with their children. That's how we infuse the values, and we've got to walk the talk. They've got to see the values in us first. For example, you can't expect your son to put down his device if you're always holding your smartphone. You just can't, But if you say, guys, the dinner table is sacred, we're here to talk, no device at all, it starts with us as the father or the mother of the home. So I would say it all begins with values.
And they have to see it through us, from us.
Right. And there's got to be frequency and consistency because people do not follow what we say, they follow what we do. Observation is more powerful because children and people per se are more visual. So they will follow what we do.
You compete the number of minutes or hours that a person spends on the internet versus the amount of hours that you spend on them. Is that important? Should you have more hours with your children more than they have hours on the internet?
The reality here is that we wish that it's supposed to be that way. But the reality is doing business today, you and I, we've got to be online. We've got to be in front of our screens. And I think it all depends. It all boils down, Jiggy, to family culture. I think when we set boundaries and we set rules with a family, it should involve the children too in making the rules. So for example, if we're talking about, if we're having a struggle when it comes to screen time, maybe we can come to an agreement that screen time is allowable until 11 o'clock. And that goes for everyone. And we should also be accountable to each other. Like if I set the rules, I got to make sure that I'm adhering to those rules as well, because that's what creates culture. It's very, very difficult in this day and age, Jiggy, to have more time for our children, even if we are stuck in our homes. But if we are intentional to make that 30 minutes, that 1 hour, that 2 hours with them, whether it's the homeschooling time of the day, whether it's dinner in the time of the day, whether it's basketball in the playground within the day, if we are intentional in that moment, I believe that we can still win our children.
Okay, I'll give you an example, okay?
Sure.
You're on the dining table and you insist that a banana is a very healthy fruit and you should all eat it. You guys should eat it, okay? This is a very simple example. Okay, so they eat it. Really? You think so, Dad? Yeah, okay. And then they eat it fine. And then after dinner is done, they go into their separate rooms and then they Google bananas, right? Is it healthy? And then they find out a list of bad effects, bad things about a banana. And then these are from experts. I'm no banana expert. I'm just a dad. And then they see that and they have this voice that is a banana expert. Who will they believe? The banana expert or the dad who's just, talking out of his butt about a banana?
That's a very good question. They will believe you as the father if they have a relationship with you.
Yeah, but I'm not a banana expert. I don't have the background I don't have the moral background to explain to them what a banana is, because I'm no banana expert.
Absolutely. There are so many experts in the world that you and I do not subscribe to.
Exactly.
But there are people out there like Lolos who are not necessarily experts in research. But why is it that we believe in them so much? It's because we have a relationship with them. So at the end of the day, it's very important for parents to be intentional by being relational. That's the key. And our jobs.
So you're telling them to not believe in people who know more about a subject matter. Just believe them because they're your dad, they're their lolo, and nothing else. Never mind that they're not experts, that they didn't study in the school of bananology.
I'm not saying that.
What are you saying?
If I were to have a conversation with my son and my
about
son
a banana.
Yeah, I found out bananas are actually not good.
Mm-hmm.
And the subject matter expert says so.
Mm-hmm.
I go like, well, he's entitled to that opinion.
Okay.
But as far as I have lived in the last blank years of my life, I've had a banana and I'm not cancerous at all. I'd like you to make a choice, son. Okay. Choose him or choose us, our opinion.
Okay. So you're giving them a choice. You're asking them to make a choice.
I think it's important
to take sides on whether a banana is a good thing or is a good fruit or a bad fruit, for example.
I believe that teenagers and children should also be given the opportunity to make decisions.
Okay.
I think one of the reasons why children in particular are defiant and rebellious against their parents is because we have a tendency to be over-controlling under the guise of overprotectiveness.
Okay.
I think we have a tendency to decide things for them. There is a certain age that we decide for them, but there's also a certain age that we allow them to make those decisions, yet they have to be accountable to whatever decision they make. You can choose whatever you want, but you cannot choose the consequences of that decision that you make. There's an age for that, right? And so if I were approached by a teenager and they're going to tell me like, gee, bananas are freaking bad or something like that, I go like, it's really up to you. It's your choice. If you believe in the research or if you believe in what your parents have to say.
Okay, so you don't want, this is my theory about parenting. You want your children to be 10 times better than you. I don't want my children to be like me. I want them to be 10 times me. What are your thoughts on that? Because I think there has to be a part of you that has to let go and tell them, hey, if you think that bananas are not good for you, find out more about it. I probably could be wrong. What are your thoughts on that? Do you want them? Do you want your kids to be who you are? Or do you want them to be 10 times you?
That's a really great question. I would like my children to be everything that God has called them to be. I'll give you a very simple explanation. Okay. Every parent, whether we admit it or not, we have our own egos when it comes to raising our children. That ego is a pattern that was brought about by the way we were raised by our own parents. And so our parents had preferences, they had their own way of doing things, and they feel that it's necessary for them to shove that into their children. Yes and no. If the practices are great, continue. If the practices are not great, I suggest you look into other things. And that's the reason why it boils down to relationship. Because if you have the closer we are to our children, the more influential we are to them. Rules without relationship leads to rebellion. All right? It boils down to relationships. So no matter how much we try to convince our children to be better than us, if we're not relating to them, if we're not understanding of who they are individually, by the way, because one size does not fit all, one style does not work at all, right? Then it's not going to work at all. Whenever my son tells me, I want to be like you, it's one of the greatest compliments in the world, Jiggy. But to be honest, in my heart of hearts, I would want you to be everything God has called you to be. Okay. I do not want to remote control or manipulate your life. I don't want you to be a bemedaled student, but deep down on the inside depressed and upset because it's not what you wanted. I don't want you to be a nurse if you're really called to be an architect. Simply because as a nurse, if you go to Canada, you're going to make a truckload of money. I want you to be everything that you're called to be. Why? Every human being wants to be maximized for their full potential. They do not want to be subjugated or limited by the dictates of other people around them, even if they're their parents. Even if parents say, I know what's best. Well, the reality is, Kaniadto, many years ago, everybody wants to be a CPA. Everybody wants to be a lawyer. Everybody has to be a doctor. But 20 years from now, the reality is there's AI, there's robotics, there's automation. There's all kinds of technological stuff. According to Forbes.com, the top 20 jobs in the world for Gen Z will have something to do with technology, which we in our generation have known nothing about because we were sucked into trigonometry and geometry. If you know what I'm saying. We've got to be open-minded as parents too. So if my son at 18 years old gets into a fork or a crossroad in his life, Dad, what am I going to choose? Architecture, or am I going to choose this? I'm going to try to advise him without any bias. And I'm going to tell him, listen, what are you genuinely interested in? What do you think the world will need for? What do you think you can dedicate your life to? Whatever your decision is, Daddy will support you because I want what's best for you. That's what I would like for my children.
So for you, it's all about maximizing the human being. It's reaching your fullest potential.
Absolutely, because I do know that there are so many professionals out there in careers today who do not necessarily what they like to do simply because they were given an if not statement by their parents before. If you're not going to do this, then this is what's going to happen to you. They were bred by fear. They were actually, if you know what I mean, they were influenced by this kind of mindset that you've got to do it this way or else. Now, I know as parents, we have the ability to see what our children do not see based on our experiences, but we also have to be very open-minded to what the child is capable of doing, to what the child is passionate about. There's got to be some acceptance, and to be honest, there's got to be some humility there. I have to admit the fact one day, Jiggy, that my sons may not be a corporate trainer like me. I have to admit that. I do not want them, I don't want to perpetuate my career through my sons to force them to be someone that they're not, because that is going to imprison them for life. I think it's important for our children to know by now that my parents love me, my parents support me, my parents understand me, but at the same time, my parents will also trust me that one day I'm going to have to make big decisions, and I'm going to have to live up to those decisions, whether I like it or not.
It's about maximizing the human potential, and it's becoming the best of what you are meant to be. I remembered a skateboarding legend, Tony Hawk, once said, that's the problem with the people these days. They always want to be the best that they can be. They always want to be the best skateboarder, the best basketball player. But most of us will never be the best skateboarder like Tony Hawk. Most of us will not become a LeBron James. Most of us will fall short of our dreams. But 99% of us will fall short of our goals in life. And these people who are indoctrinated, who are being told by books and by everyone that you're going to be the best that you can be, you're going to be the best at skateboarding, you're going to be the best at playing basketball, you're going to be the best at teaching, at this and that, but they fall short. So they will live a life of disappointment for their entire lives.
We have to be very careful about the way we package this message and sell it to our children. When we say maximize your full potential, what that means is you do whatever it takes within the resources, within what's given to you, to do your very best. Because when we say you're going to be the best in the world, you're going to be, sometimes that can be very misleading because you're actually planting the seed of competing with others
Okay.
instead of competing with yourself.
Okay.
When we say maximizing your full potential, what I'm trying to remind my sons is you've got an ability, you've got a talent. Do your very, very best at whatever you have so you can become a better version of yourself.
Okay.
You know, LeBron James, Steph Curry, that's your inspiration, but you may never ever be. I mean, who knows? You may never ever be at the same level as they are. I mean, your dad's 6'3", that guy is 6'8". But the point is, you can use them as a source of inspiration to build the routines, to build the fundamentals, to build the work ethics that you have.
Okay.
You know, use them as a source of inspiration, because I do agree with you. Not everybody's going to be like LeBron James or Steph Curry, but they certainly have the potential to be a good basketball player in due time. So as a parent, my responsibility is to ignite potential in my children, to make them believe in the first place that potential is deeply seated in each one of us.
Because again, back to that Tony Hawk conversation, he said that everybody wants to be like me. But how about the person who cleans the skateboards? How about the person who cleans the skateboard playground? We won't have people like that because of all these dreams that we have developed for them to accomplish all these great things. But how about just being satisfied, being all right with being the person who cleans the skateboard playground, and that being enough too? How about that?
That's the reason why, Jiggy, I believe with all my heart that people have to understand their calling. You know, there are two important days in our lives: the day that you were born and the day that you found out why you were born. And so I think it's very important for people to understand not everybody is called to be a Tony Hawk or a LeBron James. We've got to figure out who we're called and who we're meant to be. We see these iconic figures and they represent inspirers for us, you know, to inspire us towards having the right work ethic and stuff like that. But to copy them, to duplicate them, is one of the biggest ways to shoot yourself at your foot. Why? Because that's a very huge standard that you may not fulfill, and you're only going to disappoint and frustrate yourself. I think we need to be able to help our children, or anyone for that matter, figure out what's your purpose, what's your life calling. You know, why on the world, why on earth were you born in the first place? And when you find that, I promise you, there's a huge degree of fulfillment that money can't buy. Trust me.
Wow, those are big words, Adrian. What you were born to do. Some people don't ever know what they were born to do until the end. How do you know what you were born to do? What are the telltale signs of knowing what it is that you were born to do?
I'd like to say that everything begins with interest. You know, if you're interested in something, if it's something that you're always curious to look at, I think that's great. Okay. But eventually, interest leads to something else. Interest leads to your passion. You know, when you're interested, say, for example, in the field of photography, and all of a sudden you borrow your cousin's camera and you take pictures, all of a sudden it becomes your passion, right? And then you realize that your passion begins to elevate, and all of a sudden you realize you are not just meant to hold a camera, but you are meant to take pictures so that you can frame the memories of human beings for the rest of their lives.
Okay.
So I'd like to say, Jiggy, interest is the child, all right? Passion is the teenager.
Okay.
And purpose is the adult. Look at it this way, wherein, you know, interest is the seed and passion is the tree and purpose are the branches or the fruit of that particular tree. And
you know, we live in very uncertain times now, Adrian, and with this pandemic, some people have lost their jobs. Some people have nowhere to go to. Some people's companies have closed down and all that stuff. When you say you have found a purpose in life, let's say you were born to do this particular job, doesn't that limit you? Doesn't that stop you from pivoting? Because that was your purpose. That was what you were born to do. And that thing that you thought you were born to do does not exist anymore. What happens to that person?
Oftentimes we get mixed up thinking that our purpose is based on the position we have in life, when the truth is it's not.
Okay.
Your purpose is not defined by what you do. Your purpose is defined by why are you alive? Why do you exist? For example, my wife's purpose in this season of her life is to raise our children, to homeschool them, to love them, to care for them, and to make them understand what a home ought to be like. That's her purpose right now. My purpose as a father is to be there for my sons and to provide well for my family. It's not tied up to a position or to a status. It's not. The bottom line of purpose is this, Jiggy, and for all of us, for all of those who are listening out there, the bottom line for purpose is, with whatever it is that you're doing, does it fulfill you? Does it add value into the lives of other people? Because when it does, then you realize that you've lost yourself. Here's what I think what purpose is. We find our purpose, Jiggy, when we lose ourselves. We find our purpose when we lose ourselves. What does that mean? If you and I are too concerned about making money, and by the way, that's legitimate. I mean, it's necessary. It's essential.
We all have to eat, right?
We all have to put food on the table and send our kids to online school, right? But at the end of the day, we always have to remember, we find ourselves when we lose ourselves in serving people. What you do, Jiggy, impacts so many people, because you'll never know, there's somebody out there in his room waiting to cut himself because he's depressed. But the message that you gave spoke to him, and that made him make a U-turn. In that moment, you did not know. But if somebody will call you and tell you, I was the boy, 18 years old, who wanted to kill myself, and I just wanted to end my life, but you said something that made me stop. In that moment, you realize your purpose in life is not being a broadcaster. That's the position. Your purpose in life was to inspire people, to change a person's life. It sounds spiritual, it sounds deep, but it's fulfilling, right? It makes you feel so, as your program is called, alive. Do you understand? Anything at all that makes you so alive is your purpose.
Okay.
All right. For example, the purpose of an entrepreneur is not to be a money-making machine, in my opinion. I think the purpose of an entrepreneur is to find solutions to a problem that will affect an ecosystem. That's why he was called to be an entrepreneur. The money will follow if you do what's right, right? But at the end of the day, you see the bigger picture. For example, when you are an entrepreneur, and I know so many entrepreneurs in this situation, Jiggy, and I call them from time to time and they tell me, I want to shut down the business. We're losing money. I'm going to retrench 400 people. That's it, right? And that person has savings already. Here's what happened. One employee approached her and told her, ma'am, if you're going to shut down the business, what about the lives of the 400 people who are working for you? What about their families? In that moment, the employee spoke to her and told her, your purpose is to provide employment and lives and livelihood. So that person will say, heck, I will fight. I will continue being an entrepreneur because there's so many people depending on me. I'll tell you what, LeBron James is not just interested in another championship. Of course, that's great. But I think there are other people out there who are homeless, who live in streets, who will never have a decent education that he's funding right now. That fuels his drive to perform as an athlete in and off the court. You were saying?
Yeah. So you were born to do, let's say, play basketball. That's what you were born to do because you're very good at it. And people say you're good at it and people are paying you good money to play basketball, right? And let's just say, for the sake of this discussion, that the NBA, basketball as we know it, is gone because of the pandemic. Let's just say that there's no more basketball
Sure.
anymore because you can't go together in groups and all that stuff. Now, how do you re-engineer the mind of a person who's what he's been doing for his entire life, and that he has found his purpose with playing basketball, and now it's gone? How do you allow that person to pivot? What do you tell that person? What do you tell that LeBron James who's been doing that for his entire life? What? I can't play basketball anymore? That was my purpose in life. Now it's gone. So I can't do anything else but basketball. What do you tell that person?
Again, many times people always link their purpose towards their profession or their position, when the reality is purpose is bigger than that.
Okay.
Of course, if I were to approach that person, I'd make sure first that he or she wanted my advice in the first place, because that is a very sensitive situation.
Yeah.
The second step that I would do is this. I would say, now that there are
more basketball games
in basketball or in the NBA, what are some of the opportunities that you can use so that you can be of service to other people? Is it your leadership? Is it your influence? Is it your finance? Or is it your expertise? LIFE. Like, is it your leadership? Do you have people who are following you? Is it your influence? Are you a voice amidst all the noise? Is it your finance? Maybe you've got so much that maybe that's supposed to be rechanneled to other causes that would need your help. Or do you have an expertise that others can benefit from? But at the end of the day, I'm not trying to be philosophical about this, Jiggy. At the end of the day, everything created must make its accountability with its creator. In other words, at the end of the day, when I'm down and out, let's say, for example, nobody will hire me as a coach or as a trainer.
Or you lose your voice because of some medical reasons.
Exactly, permanently, and my back is against the wall. I think the only option for me in that situation is to go back to my creator God and ask him, what would you like for me to do next? Because in reality, I do not know what the future holds, but I certainly know who holds my future, and that's you. I would do that. That's my opinion, right? Why? Because anything created must make its accountability with its creator. And when you find that center, when you go back to the original source and you know for a fact that he's leading your steps, then you can have confidence to find your footing again. And I think the CoronaVerse situation in our lives has made us realize that there is a God humbling us so that he alone can reinvent us or rebrand us to who we're really called to be. Whether it's a radio broadcaster, a podcaster, a trainer, a blogger, an insurance agent, a real estate broker, at the end of the day, your purpose was meant to serve. Your passion is for yourself, but your purpose is for others.
I guess that's what should give people a purpose, right? I mean, I remember a quote that I love so much, that we are only allowed to help ourselves, but it is in helping others that we only know how. Meaning to say, our purpose is really about service to others.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What you're doing right now, Jiggy, may be insignificant to you. Maybe there will be some episodes or podcasts that the listenership or the viewership is low, but you'll never know. Out of the 5 people who heard you, there was a message that resonated to them, and it'll stick with them like a tattoo in their body. You know, we'll never know. At the end of the day, you wake up every single day, Jiggy, simply because you want to serve and not be served. Your goal is not to be popular. I mean, to be honest, you are quite popular, but your goal is not to have a higher rating. Your goal is really, what can I do in this talk to add service or add value to other people? And that will
make people happy.
Exactly. Exactly. Make people alive.
Wow. You know, we could talk all day,
I know.
Adrian. I haven't been talking to a human being, this long for a long, long time. There was about children of overseas workers. How do you make that connection now? Children of whose parents are overseas. How difficult is that task of raising them?
It's very difficult. I know, because I was raised in that home. I was raised by my mom, who was very hardworking and very career oriented, and my dad was very busy working abroad, just to make sure that we had a comfortable life. And it was very difficult every time he'd make a long distance call back in the day, and we would just say, hi, hello, how are you? And that was it. There was no intimacy. And so children right now are left behind, and they're growing up in a home that has very little influence from their fathers or their parents, especially if they're working abroad. And I think they're heroes, yes. But I also believe that, in my opinion, I believe that there are some things in this life that are worth fighting for. And there's some things in this life that are far more valuable than a high-paying 80,000, 90,000 overseas job. And that's your family, because your family is irreplaceable. So to all the overseas workers out there, we do not belittle and we do not minimize the kind of effort and sacrifices that you put in. But I'm hoping that one day, after you've saved a lot, that you would eventually come home, rebuild, start all over again, and regain relationship with your children. Because one day, as you have left home, they're also going to leave home one day. And the last thing that should want to happen is that they never knew the father or the mother who raised them. And so it's important for them to build that connection one day.
So you can, you're saying it's impossible for you to build a relationship online through phone calls and FaceTime and all that stuff. They've got to come back home. And I think it'll become a cycle, because if they see you leave, you know, for greener pastures, they've seen it by example that you did leave. So they'll also eventually leave.
Yeah. Zoom helps. FaceTime helps. But nothing beats human interaction and face-to-face contact. At the end of the day, how many virtual hugs can you give? When in reality, our children do not necessarily want our presence. They want our presence more. And so a real hug matters to them. That's more Instagram worthy than anything else.
Okay. Adrian, we have a lot of people out there who are watching this podcast or listening to this podcast right now. In fact, this is on live, and I'd like to encourage everyone to please post your questions. And Andre, thank you so much for your question. Who are trying to figure out and trying to make sense of where they are now. They're trying to pick up the pieces. They're trying to do this and that. They can't really find their footing yet. The word that we love to use is pivot. What is your message to all those who are trying to figure this CoronaVerse out?
Well, certainly there's a man out there listening to this podcast who is confused, and there's a woman out there somewhere who's trying to make ends meet, you know. And I've been in that situation, and we're all stuck in this pandemic. But I just want to encourage others out there, everyone who's listening to this broadcast, that we've got to have some optimism instead of just positive thinking. What I mean by that is this: you know, you can't just be a positive thinker and just say, oh, everything's going to be fine. You can't just approach a business person who laid off 1,000 people and say, oh, you know, tough times don't last. Only tough people do. There's something called toxic positivity, right? I think we need to be optimistic. And what that means is optimism is not denial of reality, but it's the acceptance of reality. However, it's the belief that one day we will get through this and we see the light at the end of the tunnel more than the dark tunnel itself. That means to say that I'm not in good shape right now. I'm overweight. I'm jobless. But if I make the right decision, if I find a way, I'm definitely going to find a job. That's optimism. You know, in other words, there's action and there's movement towards the right direction. So for whoever asked that question right now, my suggestion would be use this as an opportunity to do a SWOT analysis.
What's that?
SWOT. SWOT. S stands for your strengths. W stands for weaknesses. O stands for opportunities. T stands for threats. It's easy to mark down the threats. It's easy to write down the strengths, but it's so difficult to write down your weaknesses and your opportunities. So find out, what are you weak at? But here's the most important thing. Look at your opportunity quadrant and see what are the opportunities in the market out there that would open up for you that will meet or mesh or merge or fuse with your strengths. and knock your door in that particular industry. For example, if you love selling, you may want to consider being part of the selling industry. If you like to network or to socialize with people, you might want to consider another industry that has something like that. All does not end just because there is a pandemic. There is a way. And when you make that action, when you make that move, that's called a pivot, right? It's going to be very, very uncomfortable in the beginning. But I promise you, we don't really have much of a choice, but we need to take action because there are people who are depending on us, right? It's going to be ugly in the beginning, messy in the middle, but it's going to be beautiful in the end. So we've got to find a way to look at our interests and our strengths, find the opportunities that match with that, seize them. Don't be afraid to take another job. Don't be afraid if you've been an executive and you have to like look for an odd job for now. Don't, because you have people depending on you. Let's be humble. Let's swallow a little bit of our pride. Sometimes this opportunity gives us an opportunity to look at things that we never thought we would do, just like the first example I gave you, you know? And by the way, in the midst of pain comes also the greatest motivation. When we're hurt, we're highly motivated. Why? Because we do not want to experience that kind of life permanently. That drives us. So to that young man out there, my suggestion, figure out your strengths, look for your opportunities, and make that pivot. And brand yourself too, because that helps.
I guess in these uncertain times, it is crucial for you to find out who you really are. And I think we have all we have is time. And I think your SWOT analysis is the perfect instrument for you to be able to figure out who you really are and what your strengths are. Maybe you have been doing the wrong thing for your entire life. Maybe you're cut out to become a better person doing something else. Who knows? But I think the most important thing for you to do is to do something and don't just sit there, because something that moves is more likely to go somewhere than something that doesn't move, right?
Exactly.
Adrian?
Exactly. Yeah. Resourcefulness is also key towards resilience. We've got to look at the opportunities available for us. And in every adverse situation, there will always be opportunities. We just have to keep our eyes and our heart wide open.
Adrian, I know you have a personal branding event that you'd like to plug, and perhaps anything else. Go ahead, sir.
Well, first of all, Jiggy, thank you very much for allowing me to be a part of this podcast and your show. For many years, I've always admired you because you have been one of those guys firmly anchored and established in your industry. Others have faded, but you're transcendent. And so I just want you to know you're one person I sincerely admire. So thank you for this opportunity. It's an honor to be here. I do have a training coming up. It's called Personal Branding Online 2020. And it's really all about helping professionals, entrepreneurs, leaders, executives regain their footing, recover their losses by finding a way to reinvent or to rebrand themselves. And it's happening in October already. But we're doing a free workshop preview tomorrow because we want to give people an opportunity to see if this course can actually help them or not. But nonetheless, tomorrow you're going to get a lot of really good content. It's going to get you enough, at least, to start your personal brand. So I'm going to post that on my page. I can't show you a poster at the moment, but I can certainly post that in the Adrian Ding page.
Okay.
And please do check it out. You'll have to register, though, because there's a limited number of slots. But my intention here is very simple. I just want to help professionals get back on their feet and find their way again. That's my heart.
So the preview is tomorrow, but when is the full event?
Well, the full event happens on October 6th and 8th.
Okay.
All right. It's a course that runs for 12 hours. So
Okay.
October 6th and 8th, October 13 and 15. And my training partner is a brilliant lady. She's one phenomenal human being. Her name is Mia Zamora.
Okay.
She
I know
is
Mia.
an HR executive, and she's the vice president of a huge company, of a conglomerate. We're going to be working together to help Cebuanos and professionals from all over. So she's going to be a part of that for sure.
Let's say they're already sold about this this seminar, this webinar. Can they already sign up for slots as early as now?
Yes, they certainly can. I do have the link, but how do we do that, Diggs?
I'll just post the link once I post this video.
Perfect. That'll be great. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Adrian. I knew it was going to be a blast talking to you, but I didn't know I'd have too much fun talking to you. I think we've clocked in more than an hour and a half, and I think it still feels like I need to talk to you some more. Maybe we can do another episode some other time, focus on some other arena, some other field, right?
Sure. Yeah. Jiggy, I just hope that whatever we talked about today made sense to some people listening. And, whatever happens, chew the meat, spit the bones. Whatever is digestible for you, take it. Whatever you disagree with, spit it out. What happens or what matters most is if you learn something, please apply it, because learning without applying is not learning at all.
All right. Thank you so much, Adrian. It is a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much. Do you stay?
Thank you, buddy.
Buddy.